Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, May 5th. The LA Galaxy, in miraculous fashion, did not beat Sporting Kansas City, setting new records, both for a winless streak from a defending champ, tying records to start a season winless, and, of course, the miraculous and crazy not allowing a single shot, not a shot on goal, a single shot the entire game, and still losing that game 1-0. So craziness ensues in Sporting Kansas City. I said in 17 seasons, I can't explain this. Certainly not what we saw on Sunday evening, so a lot to get to talk about. Certainly Greg Vany's future up in the air now with the Galaxy still winless after 11. To help me navigate through all of these twists and turns tonight, we're glad to have him back from hockey and anything else that they throw at him. It's Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter. Kev, how you doing, bud?
Hey, Feliz Cinco de Mayo.
It is Cinco de Mayo. I almost forgot. Mostly because the LA
holiday over here.
Yeah, the LA Galaxy. I don't know. Maybe they need a party. I was trying to ask. We were talking about it on the last show, but like, what do you do to break streaks, Kevin? Like, and by the way, you remember you have to keep it PG because I know you have some of those baseball streak busters, but you can't share those ones.
Well, I'm just trying to get back into this. I just came back from Canada, as you know,
right,
covering hockey. Actually, just checking out how things are going in our 51st state.
Yes.
Trying to get a feel. It's just like America up there. It's colder and there's more beer involved. But the Canadians are not real happy about this whole 51st state idea. So what I was trying to do is, when you have an idea, you have to sell it, right?
Right.
And so what I was telling them, no Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since the Montreal Canadiens in 1993 when they beat the Kings. If anyone's a King fan,
right,
that was the Marty McSorley curved stick Stanley Cup. In any case, it's been a long time. A team from South Florida won the Stanley Cup last year. If you play a sport on ice and you lose to a team from South Florida,
right,
there's something wrong. So I was telling the Canadians, look, if you guys become the 51st state, you will be part of a country that has won the Stanley Cup in the last 30 years.
In the last 30 years.
Yeah, I thought that was a good idea. It didn't really go
didn't
over
fly,
well.
huh?
No, it didn't work.
No, I can only imagine. Well, welcome back. You're in the midst of an LA Galaxy winless streak, as we were talking about. You and I were talking all day today. So, yes.
I do know something about streaks that
yes.
you and there could be some more danger coming my way. You know the story about Dan Beckerman threatened to stab me with a butter knife at the Lexus Club one time. Part of the reason, I've been around two AEG teams now. Since I started covering the Galaxy, they went a franchise record 10 years without making an MLS Cup final. They broke that last year. But that was during my time covering, and I say covering, we really don't cover anything anymore. We sometimes go to events and write stories on them. But in any case, I've been around the team when they had that franchise record streak of not making MLS Cup final. Now that I'm covering the Kings, they have gone 11 years without winning a playoff series.
Right.
That is also a franchise record. So I think Dan Beckerman may be coming after me again. I'm kind
It's your fault.
ruining both his teams.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely your fault. I blame you for most of this as well. I know you you haven't been totally in the thick of it, but now that you're back and I know that we've been talking about the Galaxy today, is do you have an ability to explain what we're seeing right now with the LA Galaxy? I've been talking to the people in the Discord, and somebody said this is embarrassing. And I said, well, here's the deal is, they're like, these games are embarrassing. I'm like, the games aren't embarrassing. The Galaxy have been in almost every game that I've seen them play this year. Maybe against Portland, you thought they were done, but that game was, 3-2, for a second, and you were like, oh, things are coming back. It could have been. The Galaxy didn't get outplayed by Portland. I don't think they've been outplayed. I will agree with Greg Vany on that, who spoke about that afterwards. They haven't been outplayed, but the conglomeration of results is embarrassing now, right? That's the embarrassing part. It's not the gameplay. And I don't care what people say. I can't explain what I saw on against Sporting Kansas City, except we can dive more into the details of the Galaxy. I have some ideas, but I don't know how to explain what I saw on Sunday night.
Well, I have been, since I got back from hockey, I've been digging deep into this, and I'll have a story in the LA Times tomorrow. It'll go up online at latimes.com at about 4 a.m. that delves into all these questions you're talking about. And I was talking to Alex last night, Mighty Mouse, about the idea that the only explanation is it's a curse.
Right.
And we talked about the Ted Lasso episode where they brought all the personal belongings in and burned them in the trash can. And maybe that's what the Galaxy has to do. And I know this is in jest and all, but I mean, think about it for a minute. They went to Sporting Kansas City, one of the worst defenses in the league. They got one shot on goal of their own, John Nelson. And by the way, when John Nelson, who scores a goal every other presidential election, when he is your leading shot producer, that's not a good sign. He had the only shot on goal. They didn't give up a shot on goal. Great defensive effort. Never happened before in the history of the LA Galaxy where they've gone an entire game without giving up a shot on goal. First time ever.
That is a good historical stat for the LA Galaxy. First time in LA Galaxy history they didn't allow an opponent to have a shot. Again, not talking about shots on goal, a shot, a single solitary shot anywhere.
Right, anything. And they lose the game on an own goal by their captain, who was their best defender last year, Maya Yoshida. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And there's so many stats you can look at. The Galaxy are minus 21 goal differential, worst in the league. They have 3 points. It's the worst start ever for an MLS team, winless through 11. There are other teams that have had that worst start. Montreal being one this season, but It's the worst ever start by an MLS team. It's the worst start by the reigning MLS Cup champion. It's the worst start
by the LA Galaxy history. Yeah. Since 2006, by the way. 2006, they had 7 points through 11 games. 1997, they had 7 points through 11 games. But that is it right now. You could go back
once. They've had one lead this season. That's at 64 minutes, but one lead.
62 minutes, by the way. I have it at 62. Minutes. All right. I have it 62 minutes. They've led for 62 minutes. I actually brought that up with Greg Vany. I think in the midweek, I said, you guys have only had a lead for 62 minutes this year. And by the way, it was all in one game. They scored first against Orlando. The only game, by the way, that they have scored first in league play. So 10 out of 11 games, they have allowed the first goal. And we know that when you're playing from behind, that's not great, especially not great for an LA Galaxy side that's struggling on offense.
Well, I mean, but look at this. To the Orlando game, you can look at that and say, okay, the Galaxy led for 62 minutes. They made some mistakes late. We can fix that. How do you look at this game? The Galaxy had 3 times as many passes as Kansas City. They had 11 shots, only one on goal, but they did have 11 shots. I thought they were dangerous for parts of the game. A tremendous defensive effort. Again, they didn't give up a shot, and they lose the game. I mean, how else? Seriously, how else do you explain that? Except a curse.
A curse. I've already been said. I said. I think I said on Twitter whenever I was watching the game, I'm like, I don't believe in curses, but what else could this be? Like at this point, what else is it? 2
DPs come out late in the second half with injuries.
That's the part that's the curse part. That's the part where it's like, by the way, within 5 minutes of each other, you lose. You already down one designated player. Everybody, the big story for this game, and let's even go into the starting lineup, because yes, we've talked about it. The Galaxy losing 1-0 to Sporting Kansas City. We've talked about sort of the stats behind that. The starting lineup was the closest thing they've had to the MLS Cup starting lineup since this season started. So for the very first time, you had John McCarthy, Miki Amane, Maya Yoshida, Amiro Garces, John Nelson, Marco Royce, Edwin Cerrillo, Diego Fagundes, Gabriel Peck, Christian Ramirez, and Joseph Paintsil.
The 11th different lineup they've used this year, by the way.
11th different lineup in 11 games, right? So changing things around. And by the way, most of that changing around has been due to injuries, right? It's been who's been available and trying to tinker and find it. But this was the story, which was the LA Galaxy finally get healthy. The only person on the injury report going into this game was Ricky Puig. That was it. And so it was finally time for the LA Galaxy to sort of... And by the way, if this is the first game of the season... somebody said this in the Discord. I actually thought it was pretty smart. They said if this was the first game of the season, you would be like, I'm encouraged by the fact that these guys have been injured. They haven't had a lot of time to play with each other, and they actually look pretty good. The problem is it's the 11th game of the season. Now, it's still true that this is the first time this lineup has been available this year, right? And so everything the Galaxy thought they were going to get, and whenever we had Will Kuntz on, he talked about, we thought we were going to have Marco Royce playing a lot more than we did. We thought we were going to have, Joseph Paintsil starting games and doing all this stuff. So the Galaxy get healthy. That's the story of this game, which is healthy Galaxy. Everything's going to start coming back, and the Galaxy dominated in possession. By the way, FOTMob has the possession at higher than the 65%. FOTMob actually has it at 71%. All right. And the expected goals advantage was 1.39 according to FOTMob to 0. By the way, the 0 doesn't change wherever you go, because if you don't have any shots, you have 0 expected. You can't expect to score a goal if you don't have any shots, except if it's an own goal, right? That's the expected goals. You don't count that on own goals. Don't count against expected goals. You don't really expect that. No, you don't. So this was the story of the LA Galaxy. By the way, liked the lineup, liked how it was. I thought the criticism, by the way, of the Apple TV, especially Dax McCarty, and we've been talking about this, the criticism of Gabriel Peck in this game, and the criticism of who are the LA Galaxy going to bring off the bench, and it was like, I guess it's really hard to watch 15 games every weekend. I understand that 100%, and with the Galaxy being as low as they are, like, I could imagine that you're skipping over their games. But whenever you have guys like Cuevas who can come off the bench, who is a good substitute, whenever you have guys like Julian Aude who's not starting, which in my opinion I'd still like to see Aude start, I thought the criticism of the LA Galaxy being able to change something against Sporting Kansas City was sort of fell flat for me. But looking at this game, again, 13th minute is when Maya Yoshida conceded the own goal, Kevin, and that sets everything in motion again. Now, as Vany talked about afterwards, you look at Sporting Kansas City being able to set into a low block. No incentive to go forward, which they didn't do a lot of. The LA Galaxy absolutely dominating possession, dominating momentum for most of this game. Just crazy in terms of what they were able to do. But for me, it fell apart whenever they would get inside the box. I think the Galaxy had something like 22 touches inside the box in this game. So again, it's not like they weren't creating chances. They had the touches in the box. They had everything they're doing except for the finish, and it didn't happen.
Well, by the way, I misspoke. It's a minus 13 goal differential. 21 goals allowed, 8 scored, minus 13. See, I almost made a mistake. That would have been historic.
Yeah, in itself, right?
Yeah, so they're on pace for another 67 goals allowed season. I thought the Galaxy were done with that, but apparently they're not.
They aren't, by the way. I can tell you what the actual number is if you want to see what the actual, because I keep track of that. That's one of those that I keep track of. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, maybe I don't have it. Let's see if this is it. Yeah, goal projection 65. Thank you, not 67. 64.9.
But I thought about that too. It seemed like first of all, one of the problems is, we'll talk about Greg Vany and whether he's on the hot seat or not. But short of suiting up and running on the field and trying to put the ball in the goal himself, there's little that he can do. I mean, you look at last year, the Galaxy had 4 players with 10 or more goals. Never happened before in MLS. 2 of the 4, Ramirez, Peck and Paintsil, they've combined for 1 goal.
Yes.
And 2 assists or 3 assists. These are guys that set MLS record last year. Puig isn't here, and
Joveljic is off with
Joveljic is gone. So those are the guys that were come back and supposed to lead your offense. 1 goal between the 2 of them. Christian Ramirez has 4 goals. Nobody else on the Galaxy has more than 1 goal.
Mm-hmm. Own goal now tied for second.
Yoshida now tied for second place with
right.
But what I saw when they got close, and I saw Marco Royce do this a few times and a few other players. Somebody sent me a note and said that it looked like Marco Royce was scared. I don't think a guy who's been Bundesliga Player of the Year 3 times is scared, but I do think when they get there is a lack of confidence because the team is struggling, and I think that seeps into everybody. And I think they're looking for the best pass. I don't want to take the shot and blow it. I'm going to pass it to somebody and even improve our chances of scoring even more. But you know what? A lot of times, especially if it's going to be a one-timer, you get that ball on your shooting foot, just go for it.
Yeah.
You know, as Wayne Gretzky said, to go back to hockey, you miss 100% of the shots you never take.
I'm pretty sure that was Michael Scott. I think Michael Scott said that.
Well, yeah, the great one or the greater one.
Yes.
One of those two.
One of the two.
But you have to get, guys passing up shots, looking for the pass, that just didn't work. I thought that Sporting Kansas City defense in the box was actually pretty good.
Yeah, Miller had a really good night. Davis for them he came in off the bench and had a good night. They played well in the box. If you want to talk about where I think they fell short, it was in that. And by the way, it's really easy. It was in the final moment. It was in that final pass. I think you're right. But they look uncomfortable when they get there. I think Taylor Twellman sort of mentioned it on the broadcast, but it looked, not smooth, right? That's what you're seeing. It's like rough edges whenever you get to the box. You're not seeing everything. You're not seeing the movement that you wanted to do. Maybe that was one of the reasons Greg Vany pulled it, I think at the 60th minute, Christian Ramirez, who, by the way, is your leading goal scorer and still to me is the best chance the LA Galaxy have of getting a goal from the striker.
Has as many goals this season as Lionel Messi.
That's right. Christian Ramirez and by the way, I looked at the FOT mob ratings and that type of thing, and Christian Ramirez wasn't highly rated. I'm like, well, he didn't get the ball a lot. We've been talking about the midfield not being able to progress and get the forwards the ball. With Marco Royce in there, I thought that solved a lot of problems. Now, you got zero defense from Marco Royce, which meant that Diego Fagundes had to play defense, which meant that Edwin Cerrillo really was sort of left on his own a little bit. But I saw defense from Joseph Paintsel coming back. I saw defense from Gabriel Peck coming back. So I think that they handled that correctly in terms of what it was. I saw people getting on Marco Royce like, he's useless. Get him off. I thought that was the reason the LA Galaxy had a lot of their chances. Marco Royce went off the crossbar on a set piece that almost tied it. There were two really big chances. I think Peck had one where Pulskamp came out and shut down the angle. It was just a tight angle. I don't know that you're going to score from that. Probably not even 9 times out of 10. It's tough whenever the goalkeeper is in there at that type of angle. That one. The big miss was Joseph Paintsel, and this was after Vany switched on sides. By the way, I don't think that we've seen as an actual setup Joseph Paintsel on the right-hand side and Gabriel Peck on the left-hand side, which is their true foot, right? I don't think we've seen that.
At the start of last season, before
that was it.
There was an injury. Remember when Paintsel went out and Peck changed? Yeah. I think the first 6 or 7 games of last season they played that way.
That was it. That was the last time we've seen those guys on the quote unquote their true foot, right, on the outside. And so you had Peck on the left. And as soon as they did that, they had the biggest chance of the night, which was Peck, who crossed it into Joseph Paintsel, and that should have been a goal all day, every day. And Paintsel missed it. You look at the big chances. Galaxy credited with 2 big chances. Marco Royce was in there on one, trying to cut one back. There was a lot of passes. And by the way, again, Sporting Kansas City, not incentivized to go anywhere once that own goal goes in. And I'm not there. In terms of the things that are wrong with the LA Galaxy, Maya Yoshida isn't one of them, right? Like that own goal is just whatever. It's totally unlucky.
That was a freak own goal too.
He said he felt horrible, by the way, after the game. He goes, I feel horrible, like the whole deal. He goes, I don't want to do that, but like the ball just was right there. By the way, if that ball gets through his legs, there's nobody really behind them that would have caused any problems. That was the other thing. It was a pass, but there was a pass to relatively nobody. The Galaxy had the back post covered, so it wasn't going to be this dangerous thing that was sort of coming out. It is one of the most unlucky things I've ever seen, especially in this season.
It's like he got his feet crossed up. He definitely didn't want to do that. And by the way, kudos to McCarthy, being the teammate he is, immediately ran over and lifted Maya Yoshida up and pat him on the butt and said, don't worry about it. But I think you're onto something with the problems in the box once they got in there. And again, looking for that extra pass. And I liken that to last year when they did score 69 goals and had the 4 guys with 10 or more goals. It was almost like whoever got there first is going to shoot. If it was Peck, he might be 20 or 25 yards out. He might be on the wing. He's shooting from there. Ricky Puig is shooting from outside the box. Anybody that got close, they were going to shoot. This year, it's like, I better not. I'm going to look for the pass. I'm going to try to set up a pass.
There's some of that.
Feels different.
There's some of that for sure. The big deal for me is that it's not Ricky Puig pulling the strings, and so the chances aren't as many, right? And so with me, I'm like, you sort of have to be a better finisher. And now these guys are so tight in their heads about looking at Joseph Paintsel missing that. That's probably because he was injured. Probably because he hasn't had the touches that he wants to in preseason. He's still sort of working himself back into shape and doing all those things. So those are the things that you're sort of like, that probably gets better. Joseph Painsil probably doesn't miss another one of those if that happens. And if this happens at the beginning of the year, you're not worried because the confidence is there. But this is a crisis of confidence, right? It's a crisis of confidence from everybody. I think Will Kuntz is questioning everything right now. I think Greg Vanney's questioning everything. I think all the players are questioning everything. I asked Greg, sort of how you talk to the guys after this. And it's about like, we can't, yes, the results matter. And he was always clear to say the results matter. He was saying, I don't think we played bad. He goes, and then would always talk about how, but the results aren't there, right? So we need to keep progressing. It is like a process thing, which I know people hate it whenever you say like trust the process. But I get it. You have a method to how you work, and this is how you have to get through the tough times. But I'm looking at guys like Maya Yoshida and a guy, by the way, whenever the LA Galaxy finally win a game, I am calling on as the first. I don't care if he didn't play in the game. I'm calling on him because I feel like all we ever do is talk to that guy when he loses, right? Like we're like, hey, we need somebody to talk whenever they lose. That's the captain's job, by the way, is to talk whenever there's a loss. And Maya has some really good perspective on a lot of things. He's talked about that there's pressure. He goes, there's different types of pressure. He goes, because, if this was anywhere else, we'd be in a relegation battle. He goes, that makes things different. He goes, but that's not necessarily good or bad. He goes, it's just different pressure. He goes, but we have a lot of pressure on ourselves right now. But I'm looking at the leadership there and making sure that the leadership isn't a problem. Like Marco Royce is a leader in that clubhouse. I should say locker room, clubhouse, whatever. Marco Royce is there. Maya Yoshida is there. John McCarthy is there. Diego Fagundes is there. Eric Zavaleta is there. They have these guys who are real leaders on this team. This team does not lack veteran leadership. That's sort of the point. But what happens whenever eventually this has to rattle them, right? This is not normal. Nothing about this is normal. They're playing okay and getting zero results. I don't know. You would think by now they would stumble across a win, like they would accidentally get one.
Like an own goal perhaps might help them get a win. 100%. Well, so one of the things is, whenever you win a championship, what the Galaxy did last year, in any sport, at any time, you have guys have career years. And I would argue that Maya Yoshida probably had one of the best years of his career. Mickey Imani probably did. Gabriel Peck certainly did. I think Paint still may have. So Jovalic definitely had the best year of his career. So a lot of guys had career years this year.
Yep.
They're not I'm not saying they're having bad years, but this year, but maybe they're kind of returning to the mean a little bit. There are 8 of the 11 starters from the MLS Cup Championship game back with this team.
Right.
And so I did sort of take a deep dive. I talked to a lot of people in and around the Galaxy today. And one of the things is we've been on this show and me in print, I've heaped a lot of praise on Will Kuntz. I thought he did a miracle job. So my thought when talking to these people today was, well, you know what? Maybe Will Kuntz, if he deserves all the credit for taking them to the championship, maybe he deserves some of the blame for this. The idea of, I've heard people say, look, the Galaxy's approach is get the ball to Ricky and let him do his stuff, and that's all we really had to do. That was our strategy. Well, he knew that Ricky Puig was not going to be back. He knew that in November.
Right.
He could have planned for that. So I started looking and talking to Galaxy people and said, in hindsight, would you do it differently? And they said, well, first of all, our plan was, as you said earlier, Marco Royce was going to sort of take that Puig role in the midfield. Well, he's been hurt. I found out today that there were talks about putting him on the shelf earlier this season.
Yeah.
That he was that. I have that confirmed today that he was that bad.
I was concerned. It just and I'll even let me break up because I know you have a lot of stuff to talk about. But I'll say this because somebody on Twitter said, hey, Marco Royce needs to be gone. The whole deal. He's not effective on the field. And I said my worry about Marco Royce is not whether or not he can be effective on the field whenever he's on the field. And for however long that is, Marco Royce is going to be effective, and he has been, and the Galaxy have created more chances since he came back than they probably have combined for all the other games that have sort of come in. So I've seen that. My big worry about Marco Royce is his next injury. Whenever his next injury comes, what does that do to the LA Galaxy? Because I think it's coming. Just based on his history, his injury history in Dortmund, right, and everything that he's done throughout his career. I've seen that coming, Kevin. But if he has another injury, that's where I get concerned. Where it's like his next injury could be his last injury. That might be it for the Marco Royce. I won't say experiment, but for his time in LA, if there's another injury there. Well,
and the Galaxy have their eyes open on this because the people I talked to today mentioned that. He said, this is one reason why we've gotten out of the business of hiring, aging European superstars, is because you do bring them in and count on them to do what they did in Europe, and they get hurt. And then, you've counted on them, you built your team around them. That didn't necessarily happen with this team. But the point being, so when they looked at Ricky Puig not coming back, the idea was, well, Marco Royce will fill that hole until Ricky comes back. And then I said, well, in retrospect, you look at Mark Delgado, who had a good season last year and is, playing really well with LAFC. Maybe that's the midfield guy you needed, the playmaker that you needed. And they said, well, yeah, but see, to us, it was like, do we keep Diego Fagundes or do we keep Mark Delgado? We thought we had Royce. So, of course, at that point, you keep Fagundes. And I also got a pushback saying, look, Mark Delgado played a lot in 2023 and the team wasn't that good. Well, yeah, that team didn't have Gabriel Peck and Joseph Paintsil. And
right.
So, I'm not buying that argument. Mark Delgado was good when you surround him with good players. And he's not good when he's looking for Tyler Boyd, for crying out loud, instead of Gabriel Peck.
Hey, Tyler,
he's going to have a different season.
No, I mean, yes, it is. I'll say this, though. People always say, well, Greg Vany, I've heard this criticism recently, too. Greg Vany doesn't do anything. It's just Ricky Puig, right? And you sort of talked a little bit about how Ricky goes in there and he just creates and he does stuff. Well, Ricky Puig was on this team in 2022 and 2023, right? And that didn't, again, it's a combination of things. It's everything. It's all the things as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, I guess my point is, if you want to go back and criticize Will, right?
And Will's a big guy, he can take that. So let's go back and talk about the moves. Okay, do you keep Mark? You got rid of Mark Delgado. Maybe you should have kept him. Well, it came down to we had to get rid of somebody. Remember, they had that salary cap problem. Right. So it's either in the Galaxy's mind, it's Delgado or Fagundes.
Right.
And they decided that if Marco Royce is there, we're going to have Fagundes. We want to keep him. He's more versatile, can do more things. Hard to argue with that, even in hindsight, even to look back and say, you need that playmaker. Mark Delgado was a better playmaker than Diego Fagundes, probably, but we thought we had that. So it's hard to argue with that. So then you look at, okay, well, maybe you don't get rid of Joveljic. He was your leading scorer if you include playoffs. Maybe you don't get rid of him.
Yeah.
And then the argument is they gave us $4 million.
Well, not only that.
We're cash strapped.
Yeah, but not only that, but Joveljic was demanding designated player money. Now, whether or not there is, and there's certainly been a rumor that I've chased around and I was told, listen, I think it's probably 50-50 on it, but whether Joveljic would have stayed for high TAM, that type of thing, maybe you could have, but that's not the deal that was presented. It was, he wanted DP money.
But you had one more year of him.
You did.
You could play it tough and say, look, your butt is ours for one more year, and then we don't care what happens to you. Ricky will be back by then. But, you don't make friends and you don't sign free agents later on when you do that kind of stuff. So the Galaxy got offered $4 million. They wanted to make Joveljic happy. It's hard to argue that. You can look at it now and say, hey, Joveljic has 5 goals for Sporting Kansas City. How many would he have here? He'd certainly be our leading scorer. We've only got 8 goals as a team. Maybe we should have kept him. But $4 million and keeping the guy happy, and you weren't going to keep him anyways beyond the season. Again, you can go back and look at all the things that the Galaxy did in the offseason, again, saying, hey, you knew you weren't going to have Ricky Puig. You had to prepare for that. It's kind of, you can argue at those moves, but not a lot, because when you look at what the options were, they probably took the best option.
Maybe. I certainly don't think that they were planning on the injuries that they had to Royce, to Paintsil. Those were the big ones that sort of started. And then you had injuries to, Sanabria.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Cuevas was injured. By the way, Mauricio Cuevas needs to play more minutes. I enjoy all the crosses. The driven crosses that he hits are just different than almost everybody else on the field. So that type of thing. I needed more, and I thought that they were going to get it. Second half, they switched sides. Everything is sort of going the way, and you saw the pressure building, and you saw it keep mounting, and there was at no point that I wasn't absolutely convinced that the LA Galaxy weren't going to get at least 1 goal. I was just like, well, will they get enough to score 2, right? That all ended in about the 75th minute, right? And that's whenever you get the sub on the 74th for Cuevas, comes on for Gabriel Peck, and then
Peck looked like he hurt the hip that's been bothering me. Looked like he landed on
hip,
the hip,
or lower back, or rib, or lower back or bones in the. I don't know. He looked uncomfortable.
No yellow card on that play.
There were only 3 yellow cards. They all came in the first half, and 2 of them were absolute jokes. And then there were no yellow cards for the rest of the game, which was mind-boggling. So Peck that one absolutely should have been a yellow card. If you watch the replay, it's a hip. You take your hip, which, by the way, everybody reach down and feel your hip. It's nice and pointy, and then take that pointy bone there and just drive it into somebody's back whenever they're running away from you. And that's what you get that's the bruise that you can leave. So you just take your pointed hip and drive it into Gabriel Peck's back, and that's a clear yellow card. It wasn't going for the ball, wasn't doing anything, 100%. And I was like, okay, so that's fine. But then to see that just 5 minutes later, and by the way, he was injured before he even came off, so it was really closer to like 3 minutes later that Joseph Paintsill goes down. Don't know, quad, hammy, don't know what that is. And to update you on that, injury updates, there is no injury update as of right now. We're waiting for this week, and we should be able to find out. I think on Wednesday is when the LA Galaxy will speak next. So we'll find out. But yeah, they didn't know severity or anything like that. So you went from having 3 designated players. You already lost Ricky Pooch. Now you're down to 2 designated players. You finally have a healthy team, and everybody's excited about it. And by the time you get done with this game, you have no designated players available for you anymore. I'll tell you right now, LA Galaxy aren't going to win games if they have 3 designated players missing. We've talked about the designated players ad nauseum on this show, but right now the LA Galaxy are hovering at about the designated players are playing 44.5% of the total available minutes. Here's the problem with 2 designated players. You need that to be up near 66%, and it's way down at 44.5%, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. Even if it's short-term injuries for both of them, it's unlikely that then they're going to go play in New York or anything else. Hopefully it's nothing, and they were just bruises or contusions and stuff. As long as they can play through the pain, then you're fine. If it's muscle injuries, tendons, any of that type of stuff, now you're in some real problems. But again, the LA Galaxy had their designated players play over 80% of the minutes last year, which is as high as it's ever been since I've been tracking it. But that's one of the reasons they were so successful in 2024, because in 2023 with Chicharito there with a season-ending injury, they played 48.3% of the total available minutes for designated players, which meant that you were relying on 2 designated players. Now you're in 2025, and there's a good chance that for the next game, and possibly the next game after that, because they're in short succession, one right after the other, you have a Saturday game and then a Wednesday game, you could miss both of them. So you could have them miss, 2 games in the span of, 4 or 5 days. So,
and that goes back to when you win, you have career years from a lot of players.
Yeah.
You have a lot of designated player minutes. I mean, I bet if you look back at 2014, 2012, 2011, I bet you the Galaxy DPs played a lot of minutes those years, and the years they didn't do so well, I bet you they didn't. It's just one of those things. It's career years. It's guys are healthy. People talk about the breaks going your way. When they say that, they're not talking about the ball bounces into the goal when it's not supposed to. They talk about, hey, that could have been a really bad injury, but luckily it wasn't. Or that designated player could have missed that game, but luckily he didn't.
Let's get to some super chats. Lasso, $10 super chat. Appreciate that. Lasso, evening, gents. That was a harsh one to take, man. A Maya mistake, an accident, really, but the same result. Hard to tell how bad the injuries are. What else could go wrong? Upside down smiley face. Yeah, it's all spinning out of control, Lasso. That's sort of the whole thing is, it felt like for the first time, if you picture the LA Galaxy as an airplane, they've been slowly spiraling down towards the ground, and, they're getting closer to the ground. But you know what? This game, whenever it started, it was like, oh, finally, we have control of the airplane. We're nice and level. We're not going to hit anything. There's no mountains in our way. Everything, it looks like we're just going to be able to pick up some altitude now. This is it. This finally, and then by the end of that game, the spiral has gotten tighter and the ground is even closer. And it's like, this is absolutely unsustainable, right? It's one of those things that is. I don't know who the coach is going to be. I don't know how that's going to happen. But whoever it is, good luck trying to get wins now that if you have 0 designated players available. And the confidence, the mental side of this is got to be so taxing for the LA Galaxy, especially after winning a championship is not easy, right? Like it is. You're talking about the stress of the stress. All of the things that you're worried about whenever you are winning. It's a good worry when you're winning, but it's stressful. It's long. It's all the miles on the legs. It's everything that you've seen. And then you go into this year where now you're winless through 11. There is a whole bunch of pressure because everybody's playing for jobs right now. We talk about how you can't fire all the players, but guys are absolutely playing for spots right now, whether that's this year, next year, or anything else. It is. And that's whether that's Greg Vany and Greg Vany being back. And that's a big question mark. I want to get to one more super chat, then we need to talk about Greg Vany. Adam, $10 super chat, less confidence to get a win on this two East Coast road trip remaining. And when they return home, it's El Trafico. Galaxy are breaking all types of bad records for the season. Yeah, I mean, that was sort of things in the Discord today. There was lots of talk about, if Vany doesn't win against LAFC at home, then he's gone. I'm like, one, you're never going to fire. If you're the LA Galaxy, you're never going to fire a coach after a loss to LAFC. That's giving the rivals way too much mojo on that one. But the other part is that we're now in a position, Kevin, where you look at going to play against New York Red Bull, and yes, they're in 10th spot in the Eastern Conference. They're below the playoff line. Yes, they haven't been great. That was a team last year that sort of grew into being, a playoff team. So it doesn't surprise me that maybe there's a little struggle from them right now, but at least mid-table where they're at and not feeling horrible, just a couple points or a point out of that 9th spot. So they're in an okay spot for where they are. But having said that, the Galaxy's prospect for a win in the next 2 games actually is, to me, it feels super low. I don't know they're going to go to New York, and I certainly don't think you're going to beat Philadelphia on short rest on a Wednesday night.
Well, yeah, I mean, the game with Red Bulls, remember, that's a rematch of the MLS Cup, and one team is looking for revenge because they lost it, and that would be the Red Bulls, and they are mid-table. They do have wins. The Galaxy do not. I mean, you just laid out the schedule. As you were going through those games, I'm thinking, man, they could easily make it to 14 games without a win because the Red Bulls is probably the most winnable game. Philadelphia is playing really, really well. I think they're second in the table. And then LAFC, I mean, that's an El Trafico, and really you can't say anything about that. The form doesn't mean anything going into that game. But I think those 2 East Coast games are going to be really tough.
Yeah, it's super tough. Then you have the LAFC game, right, at home. So the Galaxy get that at home. Then they travel away to San Diego, who's been tearing people apart, just beat Dallas 5-2. So they're there. Then you're home to San Jose and Bruce Arena. Yep, and that
Bruce Arena Cup.
So that's there. And then you're home to Real Salt Lake. There is, if you're telling me, and this is what we always joke about, right? Whenever you're a bad team, and I think we certainly have the experience of this. And let's say that the LA Galaxy are exactly who they say they are because the standings tell you that they're in 15th, and that's where they're supposed to be, right? We can argue about the moral victories and how they've looked against other teams, but the standings tell you, somebody asked me, is this team bad? And I'm like, well, the standings say they're bad, right? The standings say they're one of the worst teams in Major League Soccer right now. In fact, they are the worst team in Major League Soccer. They are currently bottom of the table, 30 out of 30. Whenever you look at that because of the goal differential, right? But they are a bad team, and we've been able to look at it and say, if you watch the games again, they haven't been outplayed. They're just missing just in little moments. It's not huge, big things that are causing problems, but they aren't getting results and they aren't winning. But if you're saying right now that the LA Galaxy are a bad team because the results are there, then I can't disagree with you. Can you disagree with it? It's hard to sort of sit there and say, I'm going to argue that the LA Galaxy aren't a bad team. It feels like 2023 to me, just with the way the injuries are stacking up. I know some people say it feels like 2017. I get that. The whole deal. But for 2023 I said, this team isn't that bad. I see the pieces, I see the players, I see the way that they can do it. And for whatever reason, they're, and certainly in 2023, there were a lot of reasons why the LA Galaxy were under a lot of pressure. But we can look at it. The longest single season winless streak in LA Galaxy history is 12 games in 2008. That was the last time the LA Galaxy went 12 games without a win. They are currently at 11. So they don't beat New York Red Bulls, and that will then tie them for the most ever, right? Most winless. And then they're going to go away to Philadelphia with the chance at being 13 winless. And then they come home and host LAFC at home. And that's just going to be a crazy game. But I mean, it's not crazy to say that this LA Galaxy team will have that record because it's hard to tell me where they're going to win any of those games.
Well, and I agree with you. I covered the last Chivas USA teams. They were bad. Going into the game, even though Dan Kennedy had a really good season as a goalkeeper in that last year, he was voted, I think, honorable mention all league, even though he gave up a ton of goals. Right. But the question at the start of every game was, how many goals will they lose by? It wasn't if they were going to win or draw. How many goals will they lose by? How bad will this be? The Galaxy are not in that situation. I mean, they lost this game. They didn't give up a shot on goal, and they lost on an own goal. That's just like bizarro, weird stuff. But, as you mentioned, we wanted to talk about Greg Vany. So when you look at this, you have to say, okay, the players are not producing. Peck is not scoring. Painsel's not scoring. Guys are shaky when they get in the box. They're not confident. you can't replace the entire. Well, you could replace the entire roster, but I mean that would be expensive and probably wouldn't happen in the middle of the season. So if you can't replace the 24 players on the team, do you replace the coach? And when you're looking at Greg Vany, is he the best coach for this team? Maybe. Did he have success before? He had success last year, took him to an MLS Cup championship. That that got him the playoff, the extension. By the way, last year was supposed to be the last year of his contract, but when the Galaxy made the playoffs in September, it triggered an extension, so he has one more year. But there are whispers around the Galaxy, and again, I talked to a number of people there at Dignity Health Sports Park today. There are whispers talking about the team is not creative. The team is not. They're just using the same philosophy going forward as they used last year and as they used at the beginning of the season. Greg is not reacting. And
right.
This is the story I got is Greg is not reacting to the results and to the injuries. He's just trying to plug people in, and the personnel don't fit what he's trying to do. So Greg is definitely on the hot seat. And the other problem is Ron Waxman is his agent, and they have been negotiating an extension. Greg apparently wants multi-year extension. I'm told from the Galaxy that the talks are not going well, that Vany's side is kind of dug in, not really reacting to the fact of I think what they should have done actually is they knew that, again, Greg knew he was going to be missing Ricky. He knew that could be a tough beginning of the season. He was an MLS Cup champion. I think he should have got this thing done in the offseason and not wait till this part in the season. But right now he's losing all of his leverage. He's off to the worst start ever.
Right.
And he's trying to say, I deserve another 3 years. The Galaxy are saying, what are you talking about? So I just don't think this thing is going to end well.
And that may be the answer, right? That might be the thing that sort of ends it for Vany, is that there is no future here, right? Like the Galaxy are in a position right now, and if you're Will Kuntz, you can't even, let's say Vany was open to taking a 1-year contract extension, right? Which is probably what the Galaxy want to offer right now, just in terms of, what he's doing and where he's at. So they'll extend it, which, by the way, would extend it into next year. Next year, by all accounts, and certainly it's tough to bank on this stuff, right? It's really hard to win championships. It's really hard to do stuff, but the LA Galaxy will have room, flexibility, the whole thing that they really need. They're expected to go out and make some deals. They could even make some deals this summer, sort of cashing in on some of that flexibility that they have in 2026. So there's ways to sort of, get there and make 2026 a different season than this could be. And I don't think we should start talking about that. But if you're Greg Vany, don't you want to still be here with the LA Galaxy in 2026? Maybe a year can get it done. Maybe that does. But if you're Will Kuntz and you're the LA Galaxy, do you want to announce anything right now? Right? Like, it would be, let's say they made a deal in the middle of the night tonight. Are they going to come out tomorrow and be like, oh, well, we extended Greg Vany for another year? It's kind of. I said it, I think, on Thursday's show, but Will Kuntz is going to have some grande huevos in doing some of this stuff, because I personally think that a 1-year extension is more than warranted for Greg Vany. You can look at this season however you want. I am of the believer that there are a lot of things that are sort of outside the control of any coach, and I don't know that would change. I think there is some correct criticism that Vany can get, and he actually talked about this in the postgame, but he said that he can get a little stuck in his systems and do that type of thing, right? But I've always said, and I'm a big believer in it, that there's tons of flexibility within all the systems. Greg Vany was answering Alex's question, basically on his confidence in the Galaxy style play. And he goes, this is Greg Vany quoting, let me just start with this. My reputation as a coach since I've come into the league is a guy who is tactically flexible, changes things, mixes things up. We did 5 different systems in Toronto. I honestly don't really believe that much in just the idea of a system. It's more about movement, it's more about where spaces are and how to build overloads. And we can do a bunch of systems. I can throw 5 in the back. I can throw 2 strikers up front. We can do a lot of different things, and we've done a lot of those things over the course of the last 11 games. In different phases, you've seen 2 strikers. In different phases, you've seen a back 5. And in different phases, you've seen 3 midfielders, sometimes 4 midfielders. There's been a lot of different variations that have happened, and we've rotated players into different areas. I think a lot of the tactical flexibility is inside of the game, and anybody who follows the game sees the movements of the players. They probably would recognize a little bit of tactical flexibility just based on paper. It says 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. Doesn't mean that's where it lasts the whole game. It's things for people to talk about, but has really not a whole lot to do with the grand scheme of the game. It also depends. I can sort of, but he's saying there is flexibility within the system. I actually agree with him on a lot of what he says. I think the Galaxy can be more direct. certainly, but you have to get runners into the spaces in behind. I thought that the shift from Paintsel and Peck switching sides actually helped the Galaxy get those guys in behind, and you got the best chance of the game out of that shift and that look. I think they've been playing Marco Royce up a little bit higher, but you could drop him a little bit lower if you wanted them to play make a little bit, but actually him on that line was helping them break down a low block. So I like that shift in there. Diego Fagundes moving a little more centrally to help Cerrillo out, and then also to try and create. Taylor Twellman mentioned that Diego Fagundes was really taking over the pace of this game because it was Marco Royce who was sort of on the edges and in those half spaces that was trying to dictate the game. Again, I get all of that. Here's the problem for Greg Vanney in all of this, Kevin, is that it doesn't matter how it happens now. It just needs wins. You
need, and I think a win could break that dam and things could really open up. But when you look at the contract situation, and I've never negotiated a contract, so, take that with a grain of salt. I think you're right. I think if Greg Vanney and Ron Waxman were to go to the Galaxy and say, look, the season's not gone the way we want. We still think Greg's a great coach. Give him a 1-year extension. Let him come back next year with a healthy Ricky Puig, with Paintsel and Peck, the combination we had when we won an MLS Cup. Let's bring that back. Give him one more chance. He deserves one more chance. And I would agree with that. And bring him back. And then if you're the Greg Vanney side and your coach has the success that you think he will, then you're in a position to go to the Galaxy and say, see, we told you, now give us that multi-year extension we asked for. Maybe at that point it's 2 because then you've added up to 3.
Yeah.
If you're the Galaxy, you look at that and say, you're right. He did an incredible job with those 3 last year. We're going to give him one more look. And if he doesn't do it, then we're in agreement, right? He's out of here.
Right.
And I think that would be a great deal. But the other part of this, and we've talked about this a lot before, it's firing a coach or general manager or replacing a striker. That's only half of the equation. The other half is who do you replace him with?
Yep.
And if the person you replace him with is not better, then you haven't improved your team. And so you and I had this conversation earlier today. Who's out there? Well, Jim Curtin is still out there, right?
Yep.
He's not going to be out there forever because we've already had a couple of two or three teams have replaced their coaches. More are going to do this as the season wears on. And a guy like Jim Curtin is not going to be out there forever.
Yeah, you could see Curtin going to Sporting Kansas City. Like that's actually a pretty good fit from a guy who had a lot of control. Having Curtin come in and get a lot of control in Sporting Kansas City might be a thing. Although I certainly think Sporting is going to rethink their power structure in terms of what they do. But yeah, Jim Curtin's out there. Would play a different system than Greg Vanney, and so then you'd have to sort of figure out if you have the players for that and what you can do. So it's so much, but if this deal isn't going to get done, which is an interesting twist in all of this, would just not under. And by the way, I think both of these guys are between a rock and a hard place. If you're Greg Vanney, you're like, no, I'm holding out for multi-years. Like I don't care. Like I should have gotten it already. Yeah, I just won an MLS Cup.
Had a historic season.
100% understood. I'm holding out for multiple years. I'm going to do it. And then now they don't want to cede any ground because you're going to have to sort of come down from your position, right? So this really is like it's almost like trench warfare. Each side is sort of dug in now, and the more, unfortunately for Greg Vanney, the more that this team doesn't win, the deeper those trenches are getting in terms of setting it up, because he's losing position, but the only way that you can stop from losing sort of that momentum or that momentum on your side after an MLS Cup winning and then seeing the start and everything like that is to dig your heels in and just not react in time. This is something that's happened. But if you're the LA Galaxy and eventually you're Will Kuntz and you say, this isn't progressing, like I need to know what's going to happen for next year too, then that could force everybody's hand on this. That is more interesting to me than even Greg Vanney trying to survive a winless streak, which is if you can't get a contract done, then there is no future, right? And that's an interesting one for Greg Vanney.
Well, there's a lot going on here. I mean, again, we talked a lot last year. Will Kuntz did the greatest job of any general manager in MLS history in rebuilding this team from the fan boycott mess and 8 wins and all that terrible stuff. And what a great job he did. Now he's the general manager who oversaw the largest collapse in league history. Greg Vanney won an MLS Cup at a second, franchise. Very few coaches have done that. He came back to his original team that he played with as a player, and he took them to 25 wins, including playoffs, and 69 goals, and almost won a supporter shield. Now he's coaching the greatest collapse in MLS history.
Right.
I mean, it's wild.
It's even more than that. There's a dichotomy in all this, right? The LA Galaxy keep their opponent shotless for the first time in their history. They held an opponent without a single shot. On the flip side, the LA Galaxy lost a game in which their opponent did not have a single shot, right? Like, there's all of these things that you can look at. There's good and bad. I don't blame people who are like, it needs to change and something needs to happen. I just think that in terms of real world ramifications of what happens, I actually think the contract dispute right now, or not even dispute, but their contract negotiations that seem stalled out, that seems like that's going to be more of a determinant of what happens to Greg Vany than almost anything else.
Well, because I think at some point the Galaxy are going to look at this and say, this year's over with. We're going to start working on 2026 now, and part of that is this guy really wants this multi-year deal and we're not interested and we're going to move on. I mean, Greg Vany could, in a sense, kind of dig his own grave that way if the Galaxy decide it's time to move on. You know how many times were shut out last year?
4.
How many times this year?
5. Yes.
5 of 11 games they didn't score a goal.
Yeah.
And this is a team that had 69 goals last season.
I know.
It's not all on the players. It's not all on Vany, but there's blame to be shared.
I will tell you right now, this game in Sporting Kansas City, I made this argument. A team had 65% possession. They had 11 shots. They didn't allow a shot on goal or shot at all. You can't tell me the LA Galaxy weren't prepared to play Sporting Kansas City. So did the coach do everything that they needed? Did the coaching staff do everything? 100%. They were locked, they were loaded, they were ready to go. As you mentioned before, the only thing that was missing was Greg Vany coming off the bench and toe poking it into the back of the net himself.
And he might have to do that.
He might, if there's no This is the problem going forward. The designated player problem. That is a huge, huge problem for the LA Galaxy. I don't know that you can. This is why Greg Vany is going to get more time, by the way. If you now have 3 designated players out for any amount of time, even for the next 2-3 games, what if they're hurt enough, Kevin, that they're not back for El Tráfico, right? Like that type of thing. How are you going to judge Greg Vany and this team on how they can play when they don't have any of their game changers?
That's where the contract thing I think would come up. I think you're right. If they're out without 3 designated players, I think you look and say, coach can't really do much with this. We saw what he did when he had the team. Great. But you want 3 years. We're not quite sure we want to give you that. If you're going to really hold on to that, we're going to move on to 2026 now because the season's over. So I think the contract situation really figures into that. I think everything being equal, the Galaxy would. Greg Vany is a really good coach, and he's part of the history of this franchise. I don't think there's anybody there that wants to move on from Greg Vany, but I don't think Vany's helping himself if he's saying, sure, I'm winless through 11 games, but give me 3 more years.
But I don't blame Greg Vany for holding that position either.
But that's the argument to make in January, maybe February, not now.
Well, yeah, but guess what? Too late. You're already in this position, right? Everything's going to sit. You have to figure out a way. Patrick was saying this really is between Will and Greg, and eventually they come to the table and they say, "Hey, let's get something done. We want you to stay because we think that you're part of it." There has to eventually be faith, and if that faith is placed in 1, the coach, and 2, the players, right now with the way everything's going, I think that the LA Galaxy can sort of turn around. But the players have to own this. The players have to own this. I haven't seen one game in which I thought that the Galaxy were outplayed or weren't prepared to play. And so if that's the case, then this is on the players. Find the back of the net. Something has to change. Find the back of the net because everything was there. Again, I'll show you the momentum chart on this. That's all yellow. All right. Just in case you're paying attention, right? We could even go this. Here's the crazy thing. Fatma, by the way, gave Sporting Kansas City a 6.7 rating and the Galaxy a 6.6 in this game. There is 0 chance in HE double hockey sticks that Sporting Kansas City was better on the night in almost any position. There were probably 2 positions, 3 positions where they were better. One was, by the way, at goalkeeper, where Pulskamp had a guy who spent time in the LA Galaxy system. But Pulskamp came out and actually had a wonderful game. You want to know how you can lose the game? They don't have a shot on goal. Well, go look at Pulskamp. He had 2 or 3 pretty big saves on the night from.
I thought Miller was the player of the game.
Miller was outstanding, 7.4 rating. His partner there in Volador, I should say. It was 7.6, the whole deal. John McCarthy.
wasn't he the guy that was at Hogwarts?
No, I don't think so. You're not allowed to say that guy's name. 5.8 for John McCarthy is a ridiculous number. I don't know what he need. So he didn't have anything to do.
I guess he didn't have a good goal kick.
I looked at the backup for that. I was sort of like, I don't know, man. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Maya Yoshida was a 6.0 because of the own goal. Otherwise, he's at a 7. 7.2, 7.3 next to Garces, right? Nelson. This is my problem. Get Julian Aude in there. And then they finally got Julian Aude in there only to see that their designated players are out. And then it's like, well, that didn't help you because you were trying to add offense to it and you didn't add offense to it. I'm still of the opinion that Julian Aude needs to start. So I will stick by that. But now seeing that you don't have, I don't know, maybe Julian Aude is going to end up playing left wing because Diego Fagundes can only play so many places. You could put Cuevas over in the Peck role and you bring in Aude to start in the Paintsel role whenever you're looking at. I'm laughing because the choices the LA Galaxy are having to make, just in terms of lineups and everything else they have right now, are going to be scary because there's just not that much there for the Galaxy to do. And that makes the bench even thinner. I'm interested. I think on Wednesday, we're going to find out what the injury status is for both players, and that will sort of give us an idea. I can guess because I'm just guessing, but for both of those guys to leave that game, if they don't have any long-term injury on that, then I have questions about that too, because the LA Galaxy were trying to fight for something and they both had to come out. So it's really interesting to me to see how this is going to progress, because this is going to get worse if those guys aren't on the field, not better. The Galaxy were finally healthy, and they lost both of their designated. That's the real story of this game. I know everybody wants to talk about the no shots and give up the own goal and that type of thing. You can. That's just not the story of the game for me. The story of the game is the Galaxy are finally healthy, and then they lost 2 designated players in this game. That is gigantic. Has ramifications for the entire rest of the season. Just like Ricky Puig not playing has ramifications for the entire rest of it. So, I was talking to somebody from the Galaxy, and they're like, we're not really this bad. I'm like, you're not. 100%, you're not. But you got to win a game. Like you got to give some. You got to throw everybody a bone every once in a while. Win some games. That way, people can sort of simmer down and be like, okay, everything is okay. It's not bad. But if there's no designated players, I don't. Do you expect the Galaxy to be okay without 3 designated players? I don't. I don't expect any team to be good without designated players. For the teams that don't regularly invest in their designated players, I don't expect them to be good a lot of times. So,
well, and then you lose the designated players, and as you mentioned, then it weakens your bench because 2 guys who aren't supposed to be in the game are in the game, and then 2 other guys who aren't even supposed to be on the bench are all of a sudden on the bench, and it limits Greg's ability to affect the game. I was really of the opinion coming out of last night's game, that they really botched the offseason. They knew Ricky wasn't coming back. They did nothing to help themselves. Now they're in this situation of throwing their hands up and saying, we haven't got Ricky Puig. What are we going to do? He was our whole team. Yeah, well, you knew that. And then as I was sort of talked through this with some Galaxy people, and they said, well, what are the options? What would you have done? You had the salary structure that you had to deal with. You got offered $4 million for Joveljic. Maybe you keep him. Maybe that's the decision. The one I keep coming back to is I really think this Galaxy team would be better with Mark Delgado in there. Right. But, then as it was presented to me, look, Marco Royce is coming back. He's under contract. We got to play him. And if it's between Delgado and Fagundes, and you already got Royce,
right?
Delgado and Royce become redundant. Fagundes is the guy you got to keep.
Well, and then you also, it's not just about the contracts extend past this season too. So you have to think about what happens when Ricky Puig comes back. I want to dispel this. I don't know what you tell me your thoughts on this, but I've seen a lot of people like, don't even bother bringing Ricky back this year. Just tell him he doesn't need to come back. You're good. Like, it's not worth playing him and the whole deal. And for me, that is the exact opposite of the smart thing to do. The smart thing to do is, and by the way, I want to couch this by saying this because this is the argument everybody uses against this. They go, why would you rush him back? I go, who said anything about rushing? Do not rush him back. There's no need to rush him back. But you absolutely, when he's cleared to play, everything's good to go. You 150% need him to come back and start playing. Not to save the LA Galaxy season, but Ricky has, a physical sort of relearning that he's going to have to do whenever he's out on the field. And you want that to happen as soon as possible. but it's bigger for the mental part of it, right? Because now, do you trust the leg? Do you trust how you're running? Do you trust all these things? The mental part of it, you want him going into an off season that where he's like, I am good. I feel good. I don't worry about the leg being injured anymore. I know I'm good. Because otherwise you're going to do that in the preseason and the start of next season. And that's not where you want him already knowing that he's good to go by the time the next season starts. So that's super important. So absolutely 100% Ricky Puig needs to come back as soon as he is available. That doesn't mean rushing him. That doesn't mean anything like that. But he needs to come back and he needs to start playing and he needs to get that feel back for the game. And you want that to happen regardless of what happens with the LA Galaxy season this year.
I think you'd be a little bit conservative if you are truly out of it. Maybe I agree with you, though. I think he needs, I would have said maybe 8 games if they're in it. He could help them with 8 to 10 games to go. If they're out of it, maybe he really only needs 4 to 5. But we saw that with Sebastian Lletget when he came back from that Liz fracture thing.
Yeah.
That kept getting pushed back and delayed, and you saw him getting more and more frustrated. He wanted to be out there in the field. And then when he finally did come back, it took him much longer to get into the rhythm because his whole timing had been messed up. And with Ricky, it's even more important. I mean, as good as Sebastian Lletget was, he doesn't play the quarterback position like Ricky does. Ricky needs to get that timing and confidence back. I absolutely agree with you. I think you can write off the season and still bring Ricky back.
100%.
Both things can happen at the same time.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if the LA Galaxy are in a playoff run. You bring Ricky Puig back, right? Like it's like that type of thing. You bring him back. You want him on the field as soon as he's available. Not talking about hurry up. You're not texting him, Ricky, you feeling better? You gonna want to come back? The whole day. No, you let him get right. You let him get that way he feels like he's rested, recovered, all that stuff, and then you bring him back and he plays. Because I think that's super important. So that's something. And by the way, we don't have a timeline. I would like to point that out. We don't have a timeline. We are guessing. I asked Greg Vany about Ricky Puig like 2 weeks ago, and he said there's no timeline yet. We're still a long way from that. He goes, but he's back in Spain. He was out in LA for a little bit. He's back in Spain. He's doing the rest of his recovery. He's doing that. And then he is supposed to, I think at some point, I'm going to guess in June, come back to the LA Galaxy and sort of be like, okay, now I'm doing the last touches of my rehab, the on the field stuff, like starting to do some of that with the LA Galaxy before they finally bring him back. June, July, August, somewhere in there is whenever we I think one is I expect him to sort of be back in LA maybe by the end of June, and then going in July and August. I think August, September is probably still the lineup for him coming back.
I've said on the show a lot, and I believed it until just recently that he would come back after the Leagues Cup, and if the Galaxy were in position, he could be the difference in getting them into the playoffs. And then once they got there, I thought they would be dangerous. Well, I don't believe that anymore. I don't. They're 13 points out of a playoff spot. They're way out of first place. I just don't.
Just 23 points out of first place. I don't understand. That's not even that many. I mean, what is that? 7 games, 8 games? You just have to win 8 games.
They could be mathematically eliminated from the conference championship by the Philadelphia game. I mean, it's the playoffs are beginning to look like that's not going to happen. And the more we talk about Ricky coming back and taking them there is getting to look kind of ridiculous.
I'll say yes and no though. You're talking about they are 12 points from a playoff spot. Right? Can they make up?
That's 4 wins. They have to win 4 games while the other teams lose 4 games.
Yeah, I understand. But I mean, overall, if you're going to make a run and the Galaxy suddenly figure things out and things start to flow in the right way, they actually have their designated players. Like there are ways. Listen, you cannot write the season off yet. People want to.
Not yet.
No, but I'm not saying it's far. If they keep losing, it's going to get a lot closer to being like, oh, this is it. But bottom line is, the Galaxy can start winning by the end of this month and still put themselves in a position to challenge for a playoff spot, right? I mean, I still think that that's true. Do I think that's realistic? It's becoming less and less realistic. 100%, it's becoming less and less realistic. I think the big stuff here is crazy, Kevin. We're talking about all this stuff that happens on the field and all this thing. The real stuff that's gonna affect the season is probably stuff that happens off the field, right? Which is going to be 1, the Vany contract, 2, what Will Kuntz can do in the summertime. I imagine Vany stays until the summertime to sort of see if they can bring in somebody to sort of fix some things. And again, where's that biggest need? And that's kind of weird because you're going to ask for biggest need and it's probably going to be in the midfield, and then you're going to be like, but Ricky's only a couple months from being back, so like what do you do? What type of person do you want to fit into the midfield? I would expect maybe a little more veteran status, right? A guy who's experienced, but I also think that you have to plan for the fact that you're going to have Diego Fagundes. I think that you're going to have Marco Royce, that you're going to have Ricky Puig, and then all of a sudden you have all these guys for no spots. And so, are you trying to find yourself basically a Gaston Brugman who only played 1,200 minutes last year? That type of thing. Maybe that's it.
Well, what I'm looking for is a couple of things. One is the locker room, the dressing room. Who steps up? There's some veteran leadership in there. The one thing is this, and I guess this is part of this. The second thing I'm looking for is this is not fun for the players.
No.
And whether you look at it as pride, whether you look at it as they're embarrassed, whether you look at it as nobody wants to lose, at anything, this is not fun for the players. And the players want to turn this around. Not, maybe some of them want to save Greg Vanney's job. Maybe some of them want to have a long MLS career. But I think the majority of them just say, this is ridiculous. This is not fun. I'm not enjoying my life anymore. We need to win, and I think that's going to be part of the motivation. But I want to see who steps up in that dressing room. And you look there, and Marco Royce, 3-time Bundesliga Player of the Year, probably the player with the best career in that dressing room. I don't know if he's really motivated or tied to I'm not saying he's not trying. I'm just saying I don't know whether he's really into this the way he was invested in playing in Germany. So I don't know if he's the guy who's going to step up. I think Diego Fagundes definitely is a guy that could, but is he loud enough and bold enough? I think Yoshida is a great leader, but I think he's much quieter, much more reserved. And
I don't get that. I don't get that
really?
from him. No.
I think he's kind of a steady guy. McCarthy is definitely a guy that could light some butts on fire, but he's a goalkeeper, and it's hard for him to do that. So, who steps up? I don't see Christian Ramirez. Maybe he's new. I don't know if he's the guy who will do that. Peck has the language issues. I don't know whether he can do that. I think it kind of comes down to Fagundes, maybe Yoshida. Maybe if McCarthy steps up. But again, as a goalkeeper, I just feel like it's hard for a goalkeeper to yell at some guy and say, you got to run more than 90 minutes. It's like, you don't move at all.
Yeah, I know. Well, that only comes into effect, by the way, if they don't respect you. If they respect a goalkeeper, they can listen to that stuff, right? It's the whole deal. And I think John McCarthy has the respect of the players. By the way, Crazy Brain, $5 super chat. Joe Hendry from WWE visited the Galaxy this week. Adam, his 9-year-old, says, "Who is each of your favorite wrestlers?" Do you have a favorite wrestler, Kevin? You don't suit me as like a sort of wrestler guy.
Dan Gable?
Yeah, Dan Gable. I don't know who that is. Maybe
he was a two-time Olympian.
Okay. In wrestling, that was
in real wrestling. No, we're talking about.
We were talking about fake wrestling. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to get the ire of people. I do not watch wrestling. It was a byproduct of my father whenever I was growing up saying wrestling's fake. Why would you watch it? I am sad that I sort of don't have that, but I also have so many other things that I do. It's probably not another hobby that I would pick up. The Hammer is really the guy who you ask about this, but I did ask ChatGPT, who knows me pretty well, who my favorite wrestler should be based on my personality. And so I will give it to you. Their best guess was Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the reasons why, straightforward, no nonsense attitude, like my communication style, apparently. Deep connection to the late 90s, early 2000s. That one actually tracks pretty well. I'm still like, there's a black punk band that came out called, The Paradox out of Atlanta. And they are my new favorite band right now, and I'm like listening to everything. Is because it's early 2000s, like punk rock, and I'm like, and punk pop, I should really say. I'm more of a punk pop sort of guy, so that makes sense. And then they called Steve Austin the underdog with a bite. But my runner-up was Macho Man Randy Savage, apparently for reasons nobody would ever know.
I'll pick one. John Cena. And I know nothing about him as a wrestler. I know that he is a wrestler, but I really admire what he's done with Make-A-Wish and kids. And I've just read so many stories about him going way out of his way to make a little kid's life better for a day.
I like it.
And it's something that's always struck me with athletes. Just as a quick aside, when I was covering the Dodgers once, there were some veterans that had horrific core injuries that came onto the field at a game, and Brad Penny was with the Dodgers then, and the manager, and they all went over and talked to these guys, and you could see it. It just made their day, if not their week or their month, to get to talk to these guys. And I mentioned that to one of the players, and I said, that must be a great feeling being able to do that. He goes, you can do that too. Come on over. And he took me over there to the veterans. He goes, this is Kevin Baxter from the LA Times, one of our great writers. And the veterans are looking over my shoulder to see which players are coming. They're
like, no, that doesn't mean anything. They're like, who's this short guy who's in my way, right?
Get out of my way, guy.
Crazy Brain also asked, do you guys know where the away teams stay at the hotel? Yes, I know all that stuff. We just don't share that. But yes, we do know that. We know lots of things as reporters and journalists who have been covering this team for a long time. It's one of those crazy
But they
things.
do see a different. It's not one hotel. It's a few.
The one that's near the stadium is usually the same one. I will say that whenever teams come, because there aren't like a ton of hotels around, Carson. Although some teams do choose to be like in nicer places. Sometimes.
Manhattan Beach. And
Yeah,
stuff.
definitely. Let's see. Charlie, $2 super chat. The Space Jam monsters have taken over the LA Galaxy. Maybe that might be correct. Just in some of the things. Adam, $5 super chat. In my opinion, Vany has only had one good season with the Galaxy as a coach. Good job, Adam. You can read stats. Let's see. Yeah, somebody said don't say the F word, Josh, which was fake. Wrestling's not fake. It's it's entertainment. I said it. So the whole deal. So no,
It's even that. It's even there in the title.
I know. It's right there. It's entertainment. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't even know. People are talking about stuff in the chat room that I am uncomfortable. Like they just know way too much about wrestling. And by the way, I'm not judging. I'm 100% with you guys. Go love it, enjoy it. But the hammer's more of this type of thing. Prognostication. Just looking forward to the LA Galaxy. Do you see them getting out of this winless streak at any point in the next, let's say, 3 games?
Well, Philadelphia is going to be a tough game. So if it happens, it's Red Bulls maybe. Although that one's going to be tough too, because I think the Red Bulls have circled this one on the calendar for a while.
They want revenge, huh?
Well, and it's not an early game. It's 4:30, so it's 1:30 body time. So that's not a problem. But there is a long flight involved. It'd be the longest flight for some of these guys in MLS. That's a problem. And then I look at the way LAFC is playing right now, and them playing for Cherundolo, Galaxy kind of playing for Vany maybe. That one's a tough one to call because it isn't El Tráfico, and I think all the records go out. I think LAFC is the much better team. If you were not Vegas odds maker, you would definitely make them a fairly heavy favorite. But it is at Dignity Health Sports Park, and it is a Tráfico. So that might be the one. That might be the one where the Galaxy have a little bit more hitch in their giddy up and actually get past somebody.
Lasso's optimism. Anybody hear the rumor that Jurgen Klinsmann has been around a lot? Well, I mean, one is Jurgen is always around because he's an OC guy. So he's usually, I actually went to a bakery that I believe he has a stake in. It's down in Costa Mesa. And
why would you have a steak in a bakery?
Yeah, I know.
Isn't that for bread?
It is a whole wheat bakery, so everything in it is whole wheat. It's delicious. The tea is outstanding. Whenever I don't drink coffee, but I like tea. Somebody was asking what I was drinking beforehand. I was having tea. This particular tea is a vanilla tea, vanilla black tea. So it's like a dessert tea. I actually really like it. There's a new tea that I had, Kevin, that apparently there were like all of these countries coming in for a forum. There were 8 countries that were coming into a forum, and they went up to somewhere in Colorado, I think Aspen or Vail, right, for this meeting of the countries. And so this guy made a particular tea, a black tea, for these. It's called 8 at the Fort was the name of the tea that they made. It's a special blend of teas, and I said it. I was like, if this hasn't won awards for something, it's my favorite. I'm just telling everybody. I don't know why I feel the need. So,
well, I'm drinking horchata from our corporate sponsor, El Pollo Loco.
El Pollo Loco. Hey, I love me some El Pollo Loco, especially on Cinco de Mayo.
Sponsor of Corner of the Galaxy.
No, I'm shaking my head no, because everybody knows that's not authentic Mexican.
No, it's the closest on Cinco de Mayo, the closest we could come, since the lovely and talented Miss Panda is working tonight.
Last little aside, and then we'll get out on her. My wife and I were watching a Korean cooking show, and
as one
does. Yeah, I know. And so we were watching that. It was really interesting how they were setting up the cooking show and doing it. It was like a competition and doing all this stuff. But I was like, I'm watching these Korean chefs make all sorts of different food, like Chinese. Some people did like sushi and sashimi from Japan. And like they were going through all these different things, and they have all these things. And I'm like, where's the Mexican food though? Like they had Italian in there, like somebody's doing, like they had all these different things, but there was no Mexican food. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is why I can never move from Southern California. Like I'm addicted to like really good Mexican food. I guarantee you go somewhere. It's not like, somebody needs to tell me, do they have really good Mexican food in New York City? Is that like, to me, I feel like that's not something that New York City says, oh yeah, we do really good Mexican. Here in Los Angeles, we have really good Mexican food. And I don't ever want to be too far away from that. I don't.
You know what they call it in Mexico?
What? Food. Yeah, thanks. Okay, good. I was got ready to do. Somebody, random dude, by the way, backs you up. Pollo Loco isn't bad though. No, it's not bad. It's not bad. I like El Pollo Loco. I eat there a lot. I'm just saying that, it's on Cinco de Mayo. I think we could find a little more authentic on this particular, but I understand how it goes. Anything else, Kevin, that you wanted to?
So Cinco de Mayo is actually the anniversary of when the three amigos attacked El Guapo at Santa Poco.
I don't believe
what happened.
No, that's not it. Not even
that
a little
what-
bit.
that
All
what
right,
happened?
good. We need to get on out of here. They have.
All right.
Patrick says they have good Mexican food everywhere now. I don't think they have good Mexican food in Korea. I don't. I'm not saying I'm planning on going there, Patrick, but you're gonna have to convince me. El Pollo Loco is great. There's a lot of people in here who like your El Pollo. They're called, and the horchata is apparently is outstanding.
Good. It's very good. Well, I found good Mexican food, and this is absolutely true, during the 2018 World Cup in Russia.
Okay.
At a couple places.
Okay.
In Russia.
In
And
Russia.
It was authentic. It was good.
Okay.
It was really good.
BC says Mexican food sucks in New York City. Just moved from there a month ago. There, see, from the ground.
Yeah, I believe that.
Thank you. East Coast Mexican food is
Italian
awesome.
food, though.
It's awesome.
Italian
It
food
is
is really
awful from Field of Burn, by the way. Italian, yeah. I've had authentic Mexican food in Spokane. I was surprised, but it was great from Daniel. Daniel, see?
Oh, I lived in Spokane for 4 years. There's two of my favorite Mexican restaurants are in Spokane.
See, there we go. All right. Oh, in the USA. Patrick says that they have the good Mexican food everywhere in the United States. Do they have good Mexican food in like Oklahoma? Dead in the middle. I'm sure you could search and find it. You know, Yelp is a wonderful thing anymore. So, that somebody says there's no good Mexican food here in Belgium. Our Belgian friends are checking in.
Oh.
So now their list. By the way, I want to go to Belgium, but without the Mexican food, I'm not going to.
Oh, so you're kind of waffling on Belgium.
I am. I'm just going to say, I'm sure the waffles are great. Mexican food's crap, though. That's what I'm hearing for that. Sprouts? Okay.
Brussels sprouts.
Brussels
yeah.
sprouts. Oh, what a day to be alive here. All right. Anything else you got?
No, I had nothing when we started.
We knew that whenever we said hello.
I do have a Galaxy column online to 4 in the morning.
Okay.
LATimes.com. Check it out.
LATimes.com. That's where you can find it. Awesome. Very good. If you are looking for Mr. Kevin, the Panda, Baxter on all the
And why
socials.
would you?
Nobody knows. At KBaxter11 is where you can find them, all the socials. Please search them out, LATimes.com. That's where the Galaxy article will be coming up at about 4 a.m. in the morning if you're up early, but you can just catch it when you wake up. That's the cool thing about, internet.
It'll still be there.
Web pages. It'll still be there. Absolutely. 100%. If you're looking for me on all the socials, it's at Galaxy Podcast. Head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com, YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, all those places where you can find our podcast. Go like, subscribe, do all those fun things, tell your friends about us. We will be back on Thursday, hopefully with some information from the LA Galaxy on injuries to Joseph Paintsel and Gabriel Peck. All right, for Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.